Good day, welcome to our Gender and Society class. So this is actually a continuation of our discussion last time regarding the different importance of important terms in gender and society. So now let's proceed to our discussion. Let's discuss sexism. So by definition, gender issues are equated with women's issues because of sexism and gender stereotypes. So when we talk about sexism, it is defined as a prejudice against a certain sex. Because we live in a patriarchal society, men are still seen as dominant leaders in the norm. So this notion places women and the LGBT at risk for discrimination. So this discussion then becomes a pledge for gender equality. So gender equality is defined as the recognition of the state that all human beings are free to enjoy equal conditions and fulfill their human potential to contribute to the state in society. It can also be defined as equality of the sexes, visibility in public and private spheres, and full participation in society. So gender equality is actually the opposite of gender inequality, not of gender difference, and aims to promote the full participation of women and men in the society. So while some may say women have equal opportunities because they are allowed to have education, livelihood, and political participation, the women still have less access to resources, opportunities, and also decision making. So these asymmetries and inequalities limit their ability to develop and exercise their full capabilities for their own benefit and also for the benefit of the society as a whole. So this discussion is not to state that men do not face discrimination. However, so men in a male-dominant society have various advantages over women and the LGBT in all spheres: economic, political, social, and etc. So the discriminatory gender roles can be institutionalized through laws and policies. So a historical view of the women's movement will help one situate women's and gender issues as we know it. So in the next chapter of this discussion, so we'll provide more context on the women's movement, the gender and development, and the women's and gender issues in the Philippines and also around the world. Let's now proceed to cultures and rationalities, the instinct and culture. When we talk about instinct, so human beings, unlike animals, are not heavily dependent on instinct. So certainly, instinctual aspects are present in specific actions such as breathing, making sounds, and when surprised or shocked, upright walking, or choosing between fight or flight. So more than this instinct-driven actions, humans are distinct from other beings because they possess system of meanings that tell what is right or wrong and good or evil. So most of what people do is shaped or determined by these systems. For example, or for instance, so procreation is an instinct as there is a drive in people toward procreation. However, so this urge takes different forms. So a number of people want to have many children while others want to have a few. So some people suppress the instinct for procreation altogether, such as members of the religious orders. So all these decisions all depend on the meaning people give to procreation. Is the number of children about survival or happiness? Should one not have children at all because of certain lifestyle or existential considerations? So these choices are shaped not by instinct, but a frame of understanding that determines a person's giving meaning to society. So this frame of understanding is what Clifford GEERTZ calls culture. So culture is the system of symbols that allows people to give meaning to experience. So it bears all the accumulated knowledge of people coded into symbols that will help them interpret what is happening to or around them and how they can give an appropriate response to the experience. So this system is necessary because when an event or phenomenon takes place, people need to respond to it in a way that is rational to them. So the meaning of a stimulus and the kind of response appropriate to it depend on one's systems of understanding. So every person has internalized shortcuts for giving meaning and meaningful responses coded into the system, especially inherited culture. So culture provides people with systems of shortcuts for meaningful interpretations and response. So because a culture is handed down through generations, everyone knows that doctors cure you when you are sick. That prophet, that prophet is always good. That women raise children. That men should set time aside to drink with their friends. So these examples are ideas we do not even think about, but merely accept as true because culture has provided their meaning and the proper action with regard to them. So this is what culture does. It takes the place of instinct to give people a quick representation and response based on a collective experience to the things that confront them. So culture is superior to instinct because it is malleable or adaptable. So it is both learned and inherited and readily determines how one understands and acts. So it also changes when its framing of reality is no longer useful. So it is the main difference between culture and instinct. So the system that shapes human behavior is malleable, unlike instinct that is genetically coded and needs generations of mutation to be recoded. People in their lifetime can transform their culture and effectively reshape their being in the world. So just imagine how in one generation self-promotion and publicizing the self, such as in social media websites like Facebook, so have become acceptable behaviors. So if it becomes necessary to become vegetarian, a person can choose it without having to reconfigure his or her DNA. So thus, the culture is the versatile system of meaning giving. The problem in this setup, however, is that when cultural systems orient people To act in a certain way that is harmful, individuals tend to act destructively towards others without conscious decision. So if a community devalues women and oppress them, people are always or people are almost always programmed by their cultural system to act in this way. It can thus be said that treating women badly and women uh, it can thus be said that treating women badly and women being receptive to this kind or to this bad treatment are due to a cultural system. So this thought is worrisome because it means that the unjust things we do are not the acts of our free will. On the other hand, it is hopeful because it means that it means that we behave the way we do due to systems that can be changed. So thus, we can work together to change this system. After all, the superiority of the systems of culture versus instinct lies in the fact that culture can be transformed without waiting for genetic mutation to take effect. So culture can change when its system of meaning no longer serves human flourishing. So we must understand how culture can be changed so that the world becomes more just to women. So to illustrate this point, examine microaggression as a form of violence. So microaggression refers to hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults that can cause potentially harmful or unpleasant psychological impacts on the target person or group. It is a subtle form of aggression that often works against historically marginalized social groups. So microaggressions against gender involve everyday acts that send subtle messages about one's supposed inabilities and roles because of the gender. So some effects of microaggression include internalized emotions such as guilt, resentment, anger, as well as a negative implication on relationships. So microaggression is also a form of social control. So examples of microaggression includes instances in which the boys are teased for engaging in culturally feminine activities such as playing house or playing with dolls. So girls are teased for engaging in sports. Men are told to man up if they need to be tougher. So the women are admonished or ostracized when they are too ambitious. So thus, bakla, the term for homosexual male, is used to berate and control men's behavior. So the statement, para kang babae, when used on men, is used to challenge the masculinity and to show that being womanlike is bad, thus demeaning women as a gender. Although seemingly harmless, these instances are a form of correction that ensures that people do not stray from the culture's definition of the good. So in this case, men as strong and masculine is considered good, and men as feminine is bad. So this form of control can be understood as violent because it curtails individual freedoms by limiting people in narrow definitions that may not contribute to human flourishing. However, so those who commit acts of microaggression do not in any way feel that they have violated the rights of others because they are acting according to the good defined by their culture. So often, so they cannot understand the world according to any other reasoning. It shows how culture can determine the way we act towards others and ourselves without even a critical awareness of what we do and why we do it. So it is difficult to change culture. But how do people change the way they perceive things and the way they value or disvalue things? So humans are born into their ways of thinking. So sexist or misogynist thinking is inherited, which is why sexist jokes or harassment come so naturally to some. And so we must ask ourselves how to transform destructive ways of existing. So one important way is by consensually proposing universal standards by which societies can be measured. So ideally, these universal standards are put forward by international bodies such as the United Nations. So if the people of the world can understand that there are certain benchmarks of humane and just behavior, then nations and their governments could be criticized and held accountable for violating universally agreed upon rules. So today, with regard to human beings in general and women in particular, there are two such universal standards. So one is already accepted by most countries, and another is being proposed by a philosopher, especially for her advocacy of the women's rights.